Our world is big and beautiful, and there are a lot of things we wish to see before we die. But among many of its wonders, the most incredible ones are the people. There are some people who make you genuinely wonder how they walk the same earth. That's how weird they are. And during the height of sideshows, these people weren't respected or cared for. They were paraded around as living oddities, just to feed the crowd's curiosity. From a woman with the most peculiar nose anyone's ever seen, to a man whose face people refuse to even glance at. These aren't ancient myths or legends. These are the 15 circus freaks you need to see before you die. Number 15, Mongol Lark. Mongol Lark, or as remembered as the wild spotted boy, didn't come from the jungle or any mythical tribe. He came from ordinary beginnings and a rare skin condition called vitiligo. It covered his body in contrasting patches of light and dark skin, forming patterns that fascinated and confused Victorian audiences. Promoters spun wild stories, claiming he'd been captured from a tribe of spotted Africans, a racist fantasy that filled tents. But those who actually met him said he was soft-spoken and curious, more bewildered by the circus world than enchanted by it. Underneath the fake wild boy act was just a young man trying to make a living in an age that exploited difference for profit. Mungo's unusual skin made him a marvel on stage, but also left him lonely outside it. Long before people understood vitiligo, he carried the burden of myth. What made him different was never wild. It was simply human and painfully 100% real. Number 14, Veles Campos. Veles was a contortionist from Puerto Rico whose body bent in ways that looked almost robotic. The trick that made him famous was his knee. It could twist completely backward, bending the wrong way without pain. People gasped every time he did it. He started performing locally in Fortuna, then joined traveling shows that crossed the Caribbean and South America. Unlike many freaks, Campos didn't exaggerate his act with costumes or gimmicks. He relied on pure physical ability and control. Audiences were fascinated not just by what he did, but by the calm, easy way he did it, smiling through every impossible pose. Behind the curtain, he was known for discipline and kindness, helping other performers with their routines. His career lasted well into the 1950s, though little is known about his later life. Veles Campos wasn't a trick artist. He was a craftsman of his own body, someone who turned pain into art and art into survival. Number 13, Heinrich Hogg. Heinrich was known as the India Rubber Man, and anyone who saw his act understood why. His skin stretched like it wasn't attached to muscle at all, 7 inches from his ribs, sides, and neck. With a few tugs, he could shape it into wings, making himself resemble a human bat. Doctors called it abnormal. Promoters called it gold. Hogg was from Munich and spent years traveling Europe's vaudeville and circus circuits, where audiences gasped at the sight of a man who could fold himself into something almost unrecognizable. There was no makeup, no tricks. His condition, what would now be identified as extreme Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, made him naturally elastic in ways most people didn't believe possible. Off-stage, Hogg was reportedly soft-spoken and private, rarely giving interviews or indulging in the fame his body brought him. His skin made him a sideshow act, but his demeanor never fit the freak show. He was just a broken man. Number 12, Robert Aitken. Well, Robert Aitken's talent was pretty simple but super astonishing. He could remove his hat using a double backhand motion, flipping his arms in a way that defied normal anatomy. Audiences couldn't believe what they saw. His flexibility looked impossible, almost as though his joints weren't fixed like everyone else's. Some thought it was contortion. Others believed it was a rare joint condition that made his shoulders and elbows unusually mobile. Either way, Robert turned that single move into his signature act. He didn't rely on makeup or gimmicks, just that surreal, effortless grace that made people laugh and cringe at once. Over time, he became a small sensation on the sideshow circuit, performing for packed tents and variety shows. Off stage, he was mild-mannered, known for his polite sense of humor. Unlike many performers of his time, he faced little ridicule. His odd gift was entertaining, not unsettling. Robert Aitken's fame came from movement, precision, and a body that refused to obey ordinary boundaries. Number 11. The Great Lafayette. The Lafayette built his name on illusion, and it cost him everything. He started as a Ching Ling Fu imitator, blending magic with Gothic drama. Over time, he leveled up to full-blown theatrical spectacles. His most famous routine, The Lion's Bride, ended with a live lion transforming into Lafayette himself. Audiences couldn't get enough. But during a show in Edinburgh on May 9, 1911, something went horribly wrong. A stage lamp tipped, the scenery caught fire, and chaos spread fast. Most of his animals died, so did 11 people, and so did Lafayette. Ironically, he had all backstage doors locked to protect his secrets, trapping performers and animals inside. Days later, when officials tried to bury him, they found they had the wrong body. It was one of his doubles. Lafayette was discovered curled up under the stage. His illusions had outlived him. He didn't just vanish in smoke, he burned in it, sealed inside the magic he built. Number 10. Che Ma. Well, Che stood just 28 inches tall, yet carried himself with the calm presence of a man twice his height. He came from China and joined the Barnum and Bailey Circus in the early 1880s. People came to see his size, but stayed for his composure. There was something quietly royal about him, steady, intelligent, and always self-controlled. In 1882, he married Louisa Coleman, a trapeze performer, and they had a son together. After she passed away, he married again, though that ended in divorce. By 1923, he had left the spotlight behind and settled in Knox, Indiana. Neighbors remembered him as polite, graceful, and deeply proud of who he was. He passed away in 1926 at 87. Most sideshow acts were remembered for spectacle, but Che Ma left behind something rarer: dignity. He might have been labeled a curiosity under the circus tent, but beyond it, he lived like a brave man who owed no one an explanation. Number 9. Eloise Titcom. Eloise McSeany wasn't just a vaudeville performer. She was a one-woman spectacle. After a short marriage to a San Francisco dentist, she reinvented herself as La Belle Titcom, claiming to be anything but American, Spanish, French, South American, depending on the day. She faked accents, staged her past, and turned reinvention into a career. Her act? Singing and dancing in a white outfit on a white stallion, surrounded by colored lanterns and effects. Critics mocked her vocals but couldn't ignore the draw. She won beauty contests, flirted with royals, and once caused such a stir horseback riding in a revealing gown that Churchill reportedly fell off his horse. She even had the stallion stuffed after its death and used it as a hat rack. In 1910, she married performer Nat M. Wills, divorced quickly, and sued him for alimony with so much force it made headlines. Later, she rebranded again, this time as a Mexican soprano. Then she disappeared, just like her act, and no one knows why she did that. Number 8. Maria Spelterini. Maria Spelterini lived on the edge, literally. In 1876, she became the first and only woman to cross the Niagara Gorge on a tightrope. But one crossing wasn't enough for her. She did it again with baskets tied to her feet, again with her wrists and ankles chained, and once more completely blindfolded. Crowds gasped, but Maria didn't care for applause. She performed for the thrill, for the impossible moment where balance felt like flight. Before that, she toured Europe. Afterward, she continued through Russia, France, and South America. In 1877, a stunt in Argentina nearly cost her life. She recovered and climbed back on the wire. By the early 1900s, she quietly left the stage, passing away in 1912. History forgot her name, but her courage never faded. Maria didn't just challenge gravity, she made it her partner, walking above the world with a steadiness few people have ever had, or ever will. All right now, let's move to number 7. The legendary Finks mules. Finks mules weren't just an animal act, they were chaos by design. The mules kicked, brayed, and refused commands. Audience members, sometimes real, sometimes planted, were invited on stage to try and ride them. Few stayed upright. It was loud, wild, and perfect for opening or closing a vaudeville show. For animals, that was the peak. These mules weren't alone. They came with dogs, ponies, and occasionally monkeys, all part of the same unpredictable routine. The act ran through the 1910s and 20s, performing at the Palace, the Hippodrome, and other major venues. What made them legendary wasn't the animals themselves, but how perfectly they captured everything vaudeville stood for: energy, absurdity, and a bit of mayhem. Unlike other acts that relied on polish, Finks mules thrived on mess. The audience never knew if it was going to be a perfect show or total disaster. Either way, it was unforgettable and mind-blowing. Number 6. Poodles Hannaford. Well now, this one is my hero and my inspiration. Poodles Hannaford wasn't just a trick rider, he was circus royalty. Born into the legendary Hannaford family, he rode horses before most kids learned to walk. The name Poodles came from an aunt who thought he looked like one. He didn't mind. It stuck. From an early age, he performed impossibly smooth acrobatics on horseback, but crowds didn't react much. So he leaned into humor. He added clown makeup, pretended to mess up, and turned flawless technique into a suspense act. It worked. Audiences watched with their hands over their mouths. Poodles invented moves still used in trick riding today, like flipping from one running horse to another mid-gallop. He toured vaudeville, acted in 42 comedy shorts, and even performed on The Ed Sullivan Show. Into his 60s, he cracked bullwhips in shows across the country. He died in 1967, but the Hannafords kept performing. In 1995, he became the only comic writer in the Clown Hall of Fame. He earned every laugh. Number 5. W.F. Doc Carver. W.F. Doc. Carver wasn't just a performer. He was a restless dreamer with a taste for danger. Once a frontier dentist, he moved west, met Buffalo Bill, and discovered he could ride and shoot like no one else. Contests, exhibitions, and tall tales followed, each one wilder than the last. But his most daring creation came later, the diving horse act. A horse leaping from a high tower into a pool below. It sounded insane. People couldn't believe it until they saw it. The act became a sensation and would go on to define the Carver name. After Doc's death in 1927, his son Al and daughter-in-law Sonora carried it on for decades. Even Hollywood came calling. But the original madness, the spark behind that leap, was his. Carver built something unforgettable out of raw risk and showmanship, and though history turned him into a sideshow tale, every dive still echoed with the same wild heartbeat that started it all. What do you think about him? Let us know. Number 4. Anita. Anita, or as cruelly known across old circus posters as the elephant-faced girl, lived a life both remarkable and super tragic. Her facial deformity, likely caused by neurofibromatosis, made her features grow unevenly. Her skin thickened, and folds shaped her face in a way people compared to an elephant's trunk. But behind the stage makeup and headlines, Anita was calm, polite, and remarkably gentle. Promoters turned her condition into a spectacle, exaggerating her story to sell tickets. She often traveled with small sideshows through Europe and the US, where people came to stare more than to understand. Yet those who worked with her remembered her kindness and quiet humor. She earned enough to live decently and supported her family until her health began to decline. Anita's face made her famous, but it also made her a prisoner of the very curiosity that fed her career. She wasn't a monster, just a woman born different, surviving in a world that mocked what it didn't understand. Number 3. Peter Lobengula. Peter was treated like an exhibit in a world that refused to see his humanity. He called himself the son of Lobengula, the last king of the Matabele, and performed in early 1900s England as Prince Lobengula. The crowds came expecting a spectacle. What they got was a proud man performing culture under the shadow of colonial prejudice. But everything changed when he fell in love. His engagement to Florence Kitty Jewell, a white British woman, became a scandal that exploded across the newspapers. The world didn't care about his heart. It was just the controversy. He later took small acting roles, even portraying his own father. But as headlines faded, so did the opportunities. He spent his last years working in the Salford mines, far from the noise that once consumed him. He died in 1913. Peter wasn't a curiosity. He was a man caught between fascination and racism, remembered not for what he did, but for what society refused to accept. Number 2. Muhammad Ghazi. Ghazi grew to an incredible height, 7 feet 10 inches, at a time when medical science had no name for what was happening to him. As a young man in Alexandria, he was of average size, but in his late teens, his body began to change. Doctors later suspected a tumor on his pituitary gland, forcing it to flood his system with growth hormones. His bones lengthened, his hands and jaw enlarged, and his body never stopped expanding. By his 20s, he towered over everyone he met. Though circus owners offered him money to perform, Ghazi remained reserved, more shy than a showman. He took part in exhibitions for a short time but avoided fame's attention. Life for someone his size was difficult. Clothes, chairs, and even sleep were constant struggles. He passed away in 1941, only 22 years old. Ghazi's size made him rare, but his quiet endurance made him human, a gentle giant caught inside an uncontrollable body. Number 1. Hans Langseth. Hans Langseth never set out to make history. He just didn't see a reason to cut his beard. What started as a small-town contest in his 30s turned into something extraordinary. Decades later, that same beard stretched over 17 feet, longer than any ever recorded. For a short while, he toured sideshows across the country, where people paid a few cents to see it. But Hans was no showman. Once the novelty wore off, he returned home to the simple rhythm of farming life with his wife Anna and their children. When he died in 1927, people kept a part of his beard, now preserved at the Smithsonian. It's strange what defines a person after they're gone. For Hans, it wasn't wealth or fame, it was patience. That endless tangle of hair was a record of his quiet endurance, a lifetime's worth of stubborn pride from a man who never sought attention, yet ended up part of circus legend. If you found this video interesting, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you soon in the next one.